Ta-da! Here you go. Here's the deck you were probably looking for, the Deadpool deck for Arana, which is what many people think is going to be the best deck for Arana. But I'm not so sure. Arana comes as the second activate card to go live in Marvel Snap. She's a 1/1 with the activate ability of give the next card you play +2 power and move it to the right. One of the things that I'm most excited about for this card is not just the scaling features where you're going to think of Deadpool and you're going to think of Human Torch. Those start small and over more and more time, they're going to scale very high. I'm more excited about everywhere else you could potentially use this card because there are two aspects to it that are incredibly important. Number one, yes, you're giving +2 power. And it's targeted +2 power, and it's delayed +2 when you want it to drop down. This is unlike Shuri, where it has to be in that lane. This is unlike America Chavez, where you don't know who it's going to hit. This is a +2 like Forge does, but Forge has to be the next card. So this gives more flexibility and a movement piece simultaneously, even though she's a 1/1, which is her quote-unquote downside, but the 1/1 actually ends up having a lot of upside. For example, when you're looking at the Deadpool deck, look, this is something else that can be killed by Killmonger now. It's not just trying to throw in Forge on that curve. This actually helps out. It's like when you get that really awesome perfect curve of Nico down on 1, which gives the +2 to Deadpool. This now is a guarantee of that if you have Arana Deadpool in your hand. You've got the timing right. It's not the 1 in 6 that happens from Nico. So I've taken the older version of this deck that was incredibly consistent and just taken out Forge and put in Arana. Shang-Chi is now going to make more prominence because you're going to see a rise of all of these Agatha decks everywhere because they are incredibly consistent and popular, and you have giant Agathas coming down on turn 4 sometimes. Look, a Deadpool deck is a really good deck. It's a consistent deck. It's one of the most popular decks in Marvel Snap, and Arana fits perfectly into it. Look, if you're a Destroy player, just get the card. But what if you're a Move player? Does this actually make sense in Move? We just had Madam Web come to the game and really brought Move up to a somewhat competitive level. The problem is Move is a very difficult archetype to navigate. There are so many different permutations. This version of Move, which I'm just simply calling Make It Move, is trying to minimize that as much as possible. Big numbers win games. That's what it comes down to. So let's get those big numbers to win those games. You're going to play Arana with Spider-Man 2099, kill something in that lane. You're going to play Arana to move over that Human Torch into the Hercules lane, or that Vulture into that Hercules lane, or the Dagger into the Hercules. You get the Hercules line here. I don't think you need to even bounce it. I'm leaving in Hulkbuster. I went back and forth on figuring out if Hulkbuster was even a necessary card for this archetype anymore because Arana is now here. But the thing that Hulkbuster does in particular that you need in this type of deck is the delayed targeting, which is just what Arana does as well. I expect some version of Move now between both Madam Web and Arana to actually make it into a top deck in Marvel Snap. But if you want to mess with Move, just play Eliath. Plain and simple. They think you're going to Heimdall. They think you're going to do a big move. Fart Cloud. It's a variation on the older deck that I had, which was the Hydroliath deck. And I think with all of the Move that is starting to arise, putting that back in there is exactly what this meta might actually need to compete against it. So you can do all of your moves 1 through 5, settle your 2 winning lanes. You want to keep your opponents guessing with Move on turn 6 because you don't want them to know, oh, it's going to be a Heimdall every single time. It also could be 3 other movements that happen all at once because you decided to cloak on 5 and then just settle everything where it is. There's a lot of flexibility in Move, and it is an archetype we need to navigate more. Phoenix Force is hands down the #1 move type in Marvel Snap. But does Arana actually take it over the top? I think the Shuri line, which is a deck that we're going to be experimenting with also a little later on, is something to keep an eye on because Arana in the same lane as Shuri means that they can do the double up, give the +2, and then move it. Right now, I'm just going to be testing this with Doctor Strange. That very easily could change to Arnim Zola, depending on the type of build that you want. But what if you could do something different besides just simple move? Vulture kind of stood out to me and brought me back to an old deck from Kraken Null, like over a year ago, which was a move surfer deck that was a lot of fun to play. So I've named this move's newest groove in honor of that memory. I love the ability of even Grandmaster in this deck because you have that switch off, if you will, of moving a card out of that lane, hit the on reveal of Grandmaster, and then bring the Werewolf by Night into that lane, which is just a really fun mechanic to mess around with, especially when you have cards like Hope Summers, which you can play into the same lane as Arana. Activate the Arana, it hits the Hope Summers lane, then moves out into another lane. You could probably get Juggernaut even in here as another win condition simultaneously, but I do see the ability of Arana giving that extra power, Craven ramping, Vulture ramping, Sebastian Shaw ramping, and then a bunch of extra energy because of the Hope Summers bounces that happen with all the other cards moving in and out of that lane, that maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something to surf or move. Arana Tablista. Literally. Arana Surfer. It's a surfer build, and I like it for two reasons. One, we can take out Forge. It doesn't need to be there. It works the exact same way and is now something else that can also be destroyed and free up space if you need to free up space earlier with that Killmonger. Rogue is a huge card this upcoming week because there's going to be nulls everywhere from deck number 1 in the very beginning of the video. You're going to want to run Rogue or Enchantress in some capacity. Get ready to tech in your Rogues. Even your Red Guardian would fit in very well in that position if you don't want to run that. It's a very strong archetype. It is very consistent, and it is one to keep an eye on with Arana. I told you we'd revisit Shuri one more time. And we are seeing these symbiote Spider-Man variations of Black Panther and Nimrod and Shuri start to rise. But why does Arana necessarily need to be in this deck? Between Madam Web and Arana, Arnim Zola and Taskmaster, you are creating so much indecision and so many different turn 6 play lines that can't be restricted, that now you don't know as an opponent what the final move is going to be. Is it watching the Shuri into Nimrod, which got Aranya'd? Is that something that you just move over and then maybe you Taskmaster? So now you've thrown off the line, or because you didn't have Carnage and Venom? Or is it something that you just watch the Red Skull go big bang boom because you got the mega line and maybe you move it, maybe you don't? Arana helps create that indecision, very similar to Cloak. If you're a player that absolutely loves that mind game of messing in Conquest, this is the style of deck for you. I expect this to be a competitive style deck because it constantly creates play lines that you know what's going on, but your opponent doesn't, versus a very consistent play line like Surfer. You know where the power is going to go. Deadpool, you have a pretty good idea. This is what this number is. This is what this number is. This is the type of deck where you don't know where final 2 lanes your opponent is going to win on. And that makes it a very difficult deck to play against. I expect this in some kind of competition. So now the big question, do you get her? Yes, you do. Because you can use her in a variety of different places in a variety of different ways. She's a flexible card. She's going to make very good archetypes a little bit better. You're going to see it work out really well in Move. You're going to see it work out really well in Destroy and probably change the core of Destroy and Deadpool all by herself. Does that mean that you absolutely have to have her if you are short on resources? No, because there are substitutions. Many of the decks I showed on here were substitutable, if that's a word, by Forge, for example, or some other type of ramp or move mechanic. So it's a good option to always have in your deck, but it's not a mandatory option to have in your deck. With more activate abilities coming to the game, I would expect the whole scope of Marvel Snap to entirely change. Unlike Symbiote Spider-Man, this is another card that gives you that ability to get ready for that, but now at a much more approachable cost. 4 cost with Symbiote Spider-Man is difficult to navigate sometimes. A 1 cost Arana, on the other hand, that's really good. As we did last time, if you made it to this point in the video, go ahead down, go to the comments section, write down if you're going to get Arana and what deck you're going to play her in. It could be mine, it could be somebody else's. I'm curious to see what direction the community takes with it, or you could just write the word Arana. Either way works. I appreciate it, y'all. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.